Sunday school. We had a major technical problem. Like, our recording software would only do 2 seconds. Do you know how much of the book of Daniel you can cover in 2 seconds? 0 at any juncture. So I tried to teach that lesson 3 times. I know it really well now. Could not get it recorded, so we will have that ASAP for you if you're following along in our Daniel series. But here we are in John chapter 21. Now you remember probably, I got several comments about how fish for breakfast is appropriate after my last message, where Jesus said to them, and they were coming off the boat after all night fishing. 7 of his disciples came in. He told them, you guys are fishing on the wrong side of the boat. Throw your net on the other side. And they pulled out 153 fish. 153, I mean, they had to drag it in the water with the boat. It was so full and so heavy. These are not big boats, by the way. In fact, 7 people in them was quite a load already. And now they're dragging 153 fish behind them. And when they get there, Jesus says words that send chills up my spine. Come here and have some fish for breakfast. Do y'all eat fish for breakfast? You people are wrong. You don't know. Chris is wrong. Chris was one of them. Fish is not for breakfast. I love fresh caught fish. Thank you, Tammy. Even one of Tammy's cakes is for breakfast, if you must, right? But not fish. Fish is not for breakfast. There is nobody that sells. You cannot find me a restaurant that has a bacon, egg, and fish biscuit. You know why? Because people don't do that stuff. That's not right. So Jesus invites them and said, but okay, so maybe it was a thing apparently it was a thing for them, because they come and have breakfast. Jesus is already grilling. He's got a charcoal fire going, so at least he's doing that part right. And he takes this opportunity. They eat breakfast together after this long night. They've got 153 fish on the shore. But Jesus wants to have a conversation. Verse 15 says this. So when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. Simon, son of John. Now before we go further there, that's how Jesus introduced himself the very first time that they met. You ever had somebody that you said, hey, call me Josh, because now I have gray sideburns. And so people say, sir, to me a lot, or Mr. Meier a whole lot. And I tell them, go ahead and call me Josh. I'm trying to get some, bring it down a notch or two, and they continue to do it. That's what Jesus just did to Peter. Peter was the name that they called him by, and all of a sudden there's a measure of alienation in their fellowship, right? Simon. It's like calling somebody by their full name. Joshua, David, Gideon, Meier. Which I haven't done in a long time. My oldest son. Simon, son of John. Do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than these? Now, Peter has likely been in some distress, mentally and emotionally. Likely, see, if I'm to step into, this is going to sound funny. If I were to step into Peter's sandals, I don't wear sandals, but if I were to step into Peter's sandals, I know what he's doing. His brain is going 1,000, 1,200 RPM with distress, with where are all my relationships? Where do I stand with anybody after this? So he goes to work. That's a long and storied tradition in my family. If we don't know what's going on, if we don't know how to deal with that, we go work. We go to work. Peter went to work. He went to go out fishing. And this is what I think he was concerned about. Go and do some backbreaking labor, which is what he was doing. And that was the impetus for him going fishing in the first place. I do something similar. You can tell I'm probably a little sunburned. Some people have different levels of sun. When you're of a Germanic background, you sunburn. What people look at you and go, "Well, you're as red as a lobster." Oh no, this is a light sunburn. You get burned real easy. But that's what I go out and sweat. I go out and work. I go out and build things. I go out and take on a big project. Because it allows my mind to work when my hands are working. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? What does it mean to love Jesus, by the way? Now, Paso Bible Church, most of y'all are here. This is surprising. Most of y'all probably should have stayed home if you were listening to the mayor. Bunch of sinners. If it was up to him, we'd be closed down still. Thank the Lord for our other people, right? What does it mean to love Jesus? Very simply, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Jesus says to Simon, son of John, whom we know as Peter, he says, Simon, son of John, do you agapao me? Do you have an agape love for me? Do you have the highest standard of love for me? What had Peter always done throughout his ministry with Jesus? They may always leave you, Jesus, but I'm not. I'm going to go die with you, Jesus. And what is that? Well, before the cockroach, you're going to deny me 3 times. Do you have the same kind of love for me that I have for you, Peter? Is that where you think you stand? You think that you agapao me, Peter? And more than that, he puts a comparative. I like that. He feeds that a little bit. Do you love me? Now you can take it 2 ways. Do you love me more than these love me? It's one way. That's the way I think I take it. Are you of the disciples? Do you love me more than the rest of them? Or it could be, do you love me, Peter, more than you love these people? Are you superior among them all? Do you love me more than you love all of the human interaction that you have, all the human relationships that you have? That could be it. But there's a comparative. Where does your love for me stand in comparison to my love for you? Peter's still Peter. He said to him, yes, Lord. And in English it says, yes, Lord, I love you. But you know that Greek makes a lot more sense than English, right? Because I love Whataburger and I love Priscilla in English. Yes? Do you love Whataburger? It got bought by some company in Chicago, so we're going to have to wait and see how our relationship goes. But it's still better than In-N-Out, right? All right. Praise you. Oh my goodness, I offended. I knew we had one in here. Yes. In-N-Out has the worst fries in the entire world. It's awful. Okay, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Please stay. Don't run off. Don't leave because I offended you on your hamburger choices. At least it's not fish, right? Okay. And a breakfast biscuit. Well, Peter answers. He says to him, they agapao me. Jesus, I don't agapao you. I phileo you. Friend-zoned. Not in exactly the same way that you young ladies friend-zone the young men that you don't want to really spend more time around, right? Jesus says, how does your love compare to my love for you, Peter? He says, I like you pretty well. I don't hate your guts. I have phileo love for you. It's a brotherly love, a friendly love. It's only a different standard, right? What happens when you do that to somebody? You see it in sitcoms all the time, right? The young couples, during the day, they go on however many dates it takes now to say, for one of them to get to the point that they love the other person, and they are the first ones to say it. Act like this is a major competition. This is a major point. I love you. And what happens in the sitcom? I don't love you that way. I like you. What happens? Well, okay, so in the sitcom, usually one of them is stupid. But in the real world, if that happens, guys, I'm going to tell you something. Go find another girlfriend. Go find somebody else. because there has been a difference in the progression of the relationship that has been a mystery to you. And I'm going to advise you as your pastor and as somebody who knows a little bit about life that you need to find somebody who's on the same trajectory that you are on when it comes to that relationship. Because love is a decision that you make. It is not something you trip and fall into, despite your common misconceptions about it. And you need to decide to love somebody else who has decided to love you. And in this relationship, Jesus is probing him, saying, I have God's love for you. What is the love that you have for me? And Peter says, I like you pretty well. It hurt my feelings when the Romans crucified you. That's the level. Why? Because he's been in a lot of distress. He doesn't know where he stands with Jesus. He doesn't know where he stands with other people. But that's probably the most honest he's ever been when he's expressed his love for Jesus, quite frankly. Is that a good thing? For you to be honest with how much you love Jesus? I'm going to step out on a limb and say yes. Absolutely. No matter where it is. No matter how much you love or don't love Jesus. No matter how much you need to grow in your love for Jesus, because Lord knows, and he does know, by the way, Jesus knows. You cannot lie to Jesus about how much you love Jesus. He knows. Why does he ask Peter? Because Peter needs to know. Peter needs to know about his love for Jesus. And we all need to be honest where we are, because then Jesus can use us. That's the very next thing that happens. He said to him, tend my lambs. Tend my lambs. That's like the most fun job ever in the barnyard, by the way. It really is. The lambs are the most fun that sheep is ever going to be. We don't have sheep, we have goats, but they're similar. The goat kids are incredible. They are the most fun things ever. They're so cute. They're the cutest things that you ever see born. A chicken gets ugly in 48 hours. It does. The chickens are born on that day. They're cute that day, and they're ugly for 6 months. Or for life, depending on who you are and how you address beauty. Goat kids stay cute for a long time, relatively speaking. And lambs do the same thing. And you know what? You really don't have to feed them a whole lot. Guess who feeds the lambs? The mom does. The shepherd doesn't really have to do a whole lot to tend the lambs. He's just got to kind of make sure that something's not eating them. Because they're the things that get eaten first. That's the one downside to being a prey animal in a herd environment, is that you get left behind to save the herd. Shepherd is supposed to make sure you don't do that. That doesn't happen. Tend the lambs. That's once. Said to him again, verse 16, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you have agape love for me? That like I have for you, like God has for you. Yes, Lord. You know that I really like you. Second. Now, guys, if y'all are dating somebody and this happens, you're slow. Y'all think I'm being mean. I'm saving you a lot of heartache. I'm not being mean to you. You need to hightail it. That's the truth. But this isn't about the same relationship, right? Jesus' point, Peter, you need to know where you are. Yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I have a friendly love. I have warmth and affection for you. Peter's getting it. There's some parallels here, right? Because Peter has denied Jesus 3 times. Just to make sure that there was no mistake in the record. There was no misremembering. There was no faulty account given. Because I do have this warmth and affection for you. Jesus had something to say about that, right? If they're not against us, they are for us. Isn't that a pretty low bar? Is that how you determine who you're going to do business with? Sometimes that's all you're left with. But wouldn't it be, don't you try to set the bar a little higher? Jesus doesn't need that. He doesn't have your liabilities. He doesn't have your problems. He can deal with whatever level of love that you have for him as his child, as a believer. And he will work his work in your life. And that's what he says to Peter. Peter, that's good. I have agape love for you. What kind of love do you have for me? Affection. Shepherd my sheep. Now we're getting almost pastoral sounding, aren't we? Pretty low bar. Shepherd my sheep. What was Jesus talking about? Was Jesus talking about his familial sheep herd? He grew up in a carpenter's house. He was a shepherd only in this spiritual figurative sense. That's what he talked about in John chapter 6, John chapter 10, about the nature of his sheep, and that he had sheep of other folds that he needed to go and bring in. He's not talking about little fluffy sheep that you shear. He's talking about people. Now, I want to address something, because if you use this text similarly to the way I'm using it, drawing a distinction between what Jesus is saying, agape versus phileo, there are some people who may even have a degree behind their name on their business card, who frankly rarely teach other people, probably best, that will say that this distinction is not valid between agape love and phileo love, right? They'll say agape and phileo are used in an overlapping way in Scripture, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. They are sometimes overlapped. Sometimes they are expressed simultaneously. In fact, when Jesus goes and finds, you remember the story of Lazarus? Right, in the story of Lazarus, who died and was in the grave for those many days, and then Jesus came and raised him up, it says in the same text that he had an agape love for Lazarus, and then later it says he really liked him. Guys, is that a problem for you? Not a problem for me. You should have all of that kind of love. You should have agape love. That will get you over your lack of phileo love today. If you're not liking me because I don't like in and out today, you're lacking phileo, right? It's okay. Only one person was honest about it. But hopefully your agape love bridges the gap. But you can have them both. You should have them both. It's not part of our wedding vows, right? I promise to like you until death do us part. But holy smokes, isn't it best? You hope that the person that you have chosen to love on that day and sworn to each other to do it, that's going to be awfully hard if you wake up and say, boy, I have a serious affection problem every day of my life. You're supposed to have them both. They coexist. Part of the reason they'll say that, and this is a little bit technical, I'm sorry for this, but I feel like they're not as gracious even as I'm being. You may not feel that I'm being gracious with this other position. They'll say, well, Jesus and his disciples weren't even speaking Greek. Guess what? They don't know that. They don't know that Jesus wasn't speaking Greek. The only record of this account we have is in Greek. And Jesus spoke Greek, and the disciples spoke Greek. They also spoke Aramaic. They probably also spoke Hebrew. Now, would it not be beyond, I'm being a little facetious here, the firstborn of all creation to use a language that he needed to use in order to make a distinction? I don't think so. He speaks all the languages, right? he speaks all of them. He can understand prayers in all of them. But they are right. Aramaic only has one word for love, like English. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whether they were or they weren't, when John records it in Greek, he makes that distinction. See, here's the thing. People think that they can say because there's only one word for love in Aramaic, that there's only one meaning for the word love in Aramaic, and that's not true. The smaller number of vocabulary words you have, the greater the meanings. You know this, right? Because I joked about it. I love Priscilla and I love Whataburger. We know intrinsically that I do not love Whataburger the same way that I love my wife of 20 years. Yes? You know that? Do I have to explain that in depth? Y'all looked at me like I was saying something for it. I don't need to explain that? Okay. We use, the word run, I think, has 270-something uses, what we call within the semantic domain. All the things that the word run can mean in English. So when we say that there's only one word for love in Aramaic, we are not saying that there's only one meaning for the word love in Aramaic. And John is clarifying what took place, even if they were speaking Aramaic. Semantic domain is wide. If you only have one word for love, then that means that that word has to be like a Swiss Army word. It has to do a lot of different things. And so we use it, and we understand in context that it means different things. So if you run across somebody that says, Pastor Josh doesn't know what he's talking about when he's making this distinction, you can at least know that I had a rational, reasonable explanation for it, right? That I'm not just pulling it out of nowhere. There is a distinction. There's a distinction. Jesus did not criticize him, didn't discipline him for what he said. Was it wrong to have phileo love for Jesus? Absolutely not. He didn't say, you need to up your game, Peter, so I can use you. He didn't say that either. But there is a distinction. So back to the text. Sorry, that was a digression. I hope that you understood why I still believe there's a distinction between these things. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? Do you love me? Peter was grieved. He was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you agape me? You have agape love for me. Why was he grieved? Was Jesus asking him to do something impossible? Was he making an impossible comparison? Was he saying, Peter, there is no way on this earth you could have agape love for me, but do you have it? Was he just trying to twist a knife in Peter's gut to point out how bad and how weak and how empty and vacuous his emotions were? It is possible to agape love someone. Self-sacrificial love. Not in the perfect character that God is able to, but it is able and it is used of human emotions. Someone is able to be ready to give the sacrifice of even their own lives for another human being. Men, intrinsically, I say this at weddings all the time. I don't do that many weddings, but every wedding gets this said somewhere. Men, every one of you here at this wedding today would be willing to jump in front of a bullet for your wife, and that's admirable. What will sustain your marriage will be the little bits that you're willing to lay down your life sacrificially every day, because very rarely will you be asked to jump in front of a bullet for your wife, or to go into a burning building and drag her semi-conscious body out of it. You know, all of the dramatic, romantic things that we think of. That's agape love, being willing to lay down your life. And Peter, this third time, understands the gap between where he is and where he could be, I believe. And he's grieved by that. Is that what you want all the time? Do you like the guy that says, here's where you're lacking? Here's where you're failing all the time. No? Yes? You hang out? Do you make a point to spend time with that guy? I'm not saying that Jesus is doing something wrong here, but he is pointing out a true aspect of Peter's character. Because Peter has claimed this spot over and over and over and over and over through his ministry. Can Jesus use that? Not easily. He's going to have to discipline that. He's going to have to break that down. Somebody who believes that they are ready to give it all for Jesus, right now, today, and they're not really, Somebody who makes that claim, that person is not going to be used mightily by Jesus Christ in this life, in my opinion. And yet, most messages that go out over the radio or the TV and at churches, today, you need to be ready to give your entire life to Jesus Christ. You know what that is? That's rarely ever something you do in 25 seconds of your life. Missionaries come in and do this sometimes, and they tell you, you guys just aren't committed. You guys need to be ready to sacrifice everything and sacrifice your life for Jesus Christ. Yeah, you do. You may be doing that at home. You may be doing that in El Paso, Texas today. But if you're not ready today, me yelling that at you isn't going to make the difference. The first step for that is for you to recognize where you actually are in your love for Jesus. Nobody snaps their fingers and turns into a super martyr, right? Do you? The Lord works in your lifetime to increase those things in your love for Him. So Peter is grieved. He said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. I'm sure he said it just like that. You know all things. You know that I only really like you. You know I don't love you like that. I have phileo, love for you. The 3 times. This isn't about snapping his fingers on Jesus' part and saying, Peter, you need to fix your deficient love for me. This was about Peter getting real with himself, honest with himself about where he really was so that Jesus could continue to use him and accomplish his purpose in his life. Does that make sense? Because that's where Peter was, at the forefront, all the time, proclaiming a false pretense on his part about how he was willing to follow Jesus. Jesus doesn't need that from you. And to be used by Jesus Christ in this life, you and I need to be honest with where we are with ourselves, because Jesus already knows. That makes sense? We need to know that. To be honest with wherever it is that we are. You know, if we say pew warmer over here and martyr over here, does Jesus love you? You bet he does. Does Jesus have a purpose for the pew warmer's life? Be careful. I already gave you the answer on this one. Yeah. He sure does. Does he have a purpose for super Christian, super martyr's life? Yes, he does. What is he going to do with the pew warmer guy that goes around saying and has convinced himself that he is super Christian, super martyr guy? Grief and discipline. Because the first thing that guy needs is to realize that he's a pew warmer with a big mouth. Is that okay? Two things. We apply this to ourselves. And I think I've probably already covered them. Because Peter needed to be honest with himself about where he was in his love for Jesus Christ. That gave him the opportunity to continue to fulfill the purpose for which Jesus had selected him. When he said, I just really like you, Jesus, Jesus didn't say, okay, well, we'll wait. He said, tend my lambs. Asked him again, do you love me? Do you have agape love for me? No, Jesus, I just really like you. Shepherd my sheep. Third time, do you agape love me? Jesus, you know that I don't. Tend my sheep. He can use that person. And there were no exceptions, even among his own apostles. Two things you don't want to do. You never want to underestimate Jesus' love for you. You never want to underestimate Jesus' love for you. No matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter what you will do, no matter what you're planning to do, right? I've had people tell me that if I was making a plan to commit a certain sin, that there's no way that I could be a true believer. Read the Bible a little bit, guys. If I had a strategy to commit a sin. Those things don't matter. Never underestimate Jesus' love for you. Never underestimate his loving plan for your life. Never underestimate the power of his grace in your life. But on the flip side, never overestimate your love for Jesus. Because there is very rarely anything more deadly spiritually in your life than making loud proclamations that you love Jesus thousands of % more than you actually do. Yeah? Jesus can use, even if you just sort of like it, even if your commitment to obeying him is very, very small, very, very minimal, that he'll use. This morning, we are remembering how much he loved us. That he laid his life down for us as a propitiation, not for our sins only, but for those of the whole world, as a perfect sacrifice. That we could have life, and having that life, we could live it for him. We're doing it a little bit differently, and some of y'all probably didn't get the announcement. Some of y'all are wondering where the cracker is, because you're recovering Baptists or something. Baptists don't make this sort of thing. There is a wafer in there, on the lid, right under the slightly colored wrapper. So we're going to start with that. You're going to be careful, because otherwise you're going to baptize yourself with the juice instead of drink it.